Hello guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're doing AQA GCSE Biology. We're doing the first chapter of Ecology. We're doing B16. Alright, let's go ahead and get started now. So, an ecosystem is the interaction between biotic and abiotic factors in an environment. So, abiotic factors are basically things which are not living. So here I have a list of some abiotic factors. We'll come back to that later. And biotic factors, I have a list of these here. These biotic factors are basically just like things that which are living, right? So a community is a group of interdependent living organisms in an ecosystem. So a stable community would be one where all of the factors in the environment, so such as population size, they remain the same, right? So now we have a little flow chart. So the plants, they produce food by photosynthesis. The animals, they come along and they eat the food, and therefore the animals pollinate the plants. And this is a little cycle. You have to know that, right? So the next one is that the animals eat other animals, so the carnivores, right? And then they use the plants to build their shelters, right? So, for example, they build nests and burrows using plants, and this allows the plants to be fertilized a bit through the animal droppings. It allows more nutrients to get into the soil. So yeah, you know. So here we go back to the biotic factors and the abiotic factors right here. So I've made a nice little table for you. So basically, abiotic factors include light intensity, which is basically the amount of light that an organism gets. And this is important especially for plants for photosynthesis. Another one is temperature. Temperature, it makes it easier to live in an environment like that. Now we also have moisture. Moisture is also very important because of the processes which involve moisture, which is mainly decay, and we'll cover that in a video later on this channel right here. The next one is soil pH. Soil pH is a very, very important factor that is utilised by plants as well. And that's quite important because that allows the organisms to really like live a bit longer and better. So wind intensity, that's another one that's very important for the direction in the areas in which the strong prevailing winds. The shape of the trees and the whole landscape is affected by the wind, and it also means that plants transpire faster, so they lose water through the stomata and the guard cells. We've covered that in the video. And then the last one is the availability of oxygen. So the availability of oxygen has a huge impact on water, living organisms. Some invertebrates can live in water, basically. Now we have the biotic factors that affect organisms in the environment. So one biotic factor is the availability of food, right? So when there's plenty of food, organisms breed successfully, and where there's a short supply of food, animals struggle to survive and often don't breed. So they don't breed when they don't have enough food, right? So another one is the new pathogens or parasites. When a new pathogen or parasite emerges, they have little or no resistance to the disease. A new pathogen can damage and even wipe out an entire population of an organism, right? So think about like the red squirrels versus the grey squirrels, and that really ties us on to the next factor, is the new predators. So this is really about like invasive species, and due to that a new predator being introduced to an area, you know, the food chain is disrupted and a lot of populations can suffer due to that factor. Another one is interspecific competition. So that just means competition within species. So for example, if a tiger was competing with another tiger, that would be interspecific competition. And this is like a new species may outcompete another to a point where numbers become too low for successful breeding. So here we go again, like the grey squirrels were introduced in Britain and outcompeted the native red squirrels. And a good example. Another example is the Japanese knotweed, which has become a very invasive plant and pest, right? So now we'll be moving on to distribution and abundance right over here. So this is a required practical, so you should know the details of this, but I'll just go over it very quickly. So distribution is where organisms are found, right? And abundance is like how many there are, right? So you have to try and remember that. Put that on a little flashcard, just make sure you don't forget it, right? So this is a required practical. It's very important that you know the details of this. I won't go over it in super detail, but basically you have different tools to measure the distribution and abundance in an ecosystem, right? So a quadrant is a little wooden frame, often with little grids going across it this way and that way, right? And that is used to measure abundance. So how many of an organism there are in a specific environment, right? So if you go out and you want to know how many clovers are in your local park, you go and you put the quadrant down and then you count how many are in the quadrant, and then you do different parts in the park. That's basically the basics of it. A transect is basically like one of those long like measuring rulers, you could call it. It's often just like a big line with some measurements on it. A tape measure, that's what it's called, mate. So it's like a big tape measure, which is used to measure distribution, so where organisms are found. So this is more relevant when it comes to like if you wanted to measure the distribution of a specific plant along a specific area. So if I wanted to measure the distribution of daisies from the river into the forest, right, that would be, I would utilize a transect for that one, right? So now we're going to go on to competition in animals. So there are three main things that animals compete for. It's food, territory, and a mate. So obviously, animals compete for food. Like for example, herbivores may feed on the same plants, or carnivores may hunt the same gazelle, whatever, right? They also compete for territory, and also compete for a mate, so that they can like win the female, right? And to like a successful competitor is an animal that is adapted to be better at finding food or a mate than another member of its own species. It also needs to be better at finding food than a member of a local species. It must be able to breed successfully to be successful, keyword, successful at competing against other animals, right? So, competition in plants. Plants compete for four main things. Number one is light intensity. So obviously plants need light for photosynthesis. It's the equation for photosynthesis. Drop it in the comments if you remember it. It's good revision for you. And then another one is water, because again, they need water for photosynthesis. This is a very important factor that is involved in a process which is vital to the survival of plants, right? Another one is nutrients. So we know that the nutrients goes in through the root hair cells in the roots of a plant. And then the last one, obviously, is space. So they compete for the amount of space they get and how far away they can spread their roots, basically. Now, to be successful as a competitor in plants, well, you need to be very good at doing these things. And also you can have some adaptations which allow you to be better suited. So, for example, plants which spread their seed, for example, a dandelion would be better at competing against other plants. And plants like ivy, which have been adapted to climb things, they will be better at getting light intensity for photosynthesis, right? Now, another thing that we need to cover is extremophiles. Now, extremophiles, I've thrown a little extremophile there. He's wearing some sunglasses and he's on a skateboard. They don't look like that in real life, but I was just having some fun, really. So extremophiles have adapted so that they are enabled to live in environments when extreme conditions. So they've been adapted to live in environments with extreme conditions. Now that's another flashcard thing for you. So they've been adapted to live in environments with like high salt content or low light intensity or extremely low temperatures. For example, they could have like antifreeze in their cells to deal with the tundra or the winters. You know, really, really basic stuff here. Now, there are 3 different types of adaptations which apply for both animals and plants. They fall under these 3 categories. So structural, so it's the shape and colour of an organism. Behavioural, which is the behaviours that the organism exhibits. For example, I put down here migration. Migration is a really good one. For example, like birds. Birds, they go and fly in the winter. They migrate because it's too cold for them. So that's a behavioural adaptation that they have developed over time. Now, functional adaptations to do with like your internal function, so your metabolism or your reproductive system. Really stuff kind of like that. So an example of plant adaptations are surface area. So some plants have adapted over time to have broader leaves, which means that they are able to get more sunlight, and that means that they photosynthesize more or more efficiently than other plants, which allow them to have successful competition against other members of their species, which allow them to pass on the genes which make them broader leaves, right? So we'll go over that in another video. It's like your natural selection, your evolution, basically. And collecting water. This is inherent for plants which live in really hot conditions, which mean that the transpiration stream, it's always like going out, and water is always escaping from the stomata. And that's quite relevant for plants that live in hotter climates, or plants which live in climates with higher wind intensity. You got it. Another factor would be storing water. So that is really to do with maintaining and keeping water in your system, basically. Yeah. Another one that I haven't got written down here would be the waxy cuticle on the surface of a leaf. So this a waxy cuticle on the surface of a leaf would mean that plants are more able to maintain their water. So in high wind intensity or in places with high temperature, they are able to maintain their water and they're able to control the amount of water lost through the stomata. That's all for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. Good luck on your GCSEs, guys, and I really hope you have a good one.